Welcome to the Get Offset podcast. My name is Emily.
My name is Andrew.
I'm Joey.
Whoa!
All right. I don't think you clipped there, Andrew. Hey, so Joey, where might people know you from?
I am a musician. I'm in the bands Downtown Boys and La Neve.
Nice.
Nice.
But and I do like Downtown Boys quite a bit, but that's not the reason we're having you on the podcast today, is it?
That's true. I'm here today to talk about a campaign that a lot of bands have been a part of, including Downtown Boys, but we're only one little piece of it called No Music for ICE, where we're organizing musicians to take collective action against Amazon for their support of ICE and support deportations and ripping apart families. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to get my swearing out of the way right now, and I go ahead and I'm going to say, f*** ICE.
Yeah, ICE.
Yeah. How do you feel about that, Andrew?
That's not a statement I will argue against for sure.
But that ain't a word that's coming out of your mouth. Fair. Yeah, so we'll get to that in a minute. That's going to be the bulk of the episode. But first, we just kind of want to do our normal intro thing. And I just wanted to say to Andrew, what's new with you, buddy?
Let's see here. Well, what's new with me is I impulse bought a compressor pedal.
Nice.
That I'm actually pretty hyped on, mostly because it's orange, but secondarily, I admittedly, honestly, didn't think that it was going to be as good as it actually is.
The DoD 280, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it was like $50. I was up late and I had a couple of glasses of wine, was overtired, and I saw the ad for it. I'm like, screw it. I don't do this enough for myself. I need to treat yourself kind of moment. I did.
You needed a third compressor, buddy. If anybody needed a third compressor, it's you.
I needed a third compressor for my mega board for sure. To be fair, one of my compressors isn't totally functional, and this one's orange. No, so it's the DoD 280. I'm actually digging it a ton more than I thought I would, specifically for distortion sounds, distortion, and like some lead, because the way that it's playing through my rig is giving me a lot more overtone, in a really delightful way that it's very punk rock.
Nice. Yeah, I actually I ordered the 7-pack.
Awesome, and I can't wait to steal those from you as you get bored of them. Cool.
Yeah, so I'll do the demos and then I'll hand them to you, and then I will list them on reverb.com and you will ship them out in a timely manner when they sell.
That sounds like I feel like that's what like fostering kittens would be like.
I mean, you can buy them off me too. I don't care.
You just give me a litter of kittens, I'd fall in love with every last one of them.
Actually,
and then I'd have to give them away.
Yeah, I did the math on that package and compared it to the lowest priced of each of those units on reverb.com. And you saved about $30 buying the 7-pack versus reverb.com, and you got everything new. So
what you're saying is I'm getting them at your cost if I decide to buy them, as opposed to everybody else.
Yes, I just want to sell them for cost. I don't want to make money on it.
Yay.
Not like that.
Okay.
I should be.
Well, then I'll probably hold off on buying a couple of the other ones that I really want to until I have more cash.
Yeah. So, Joey, what's new with you?
What's new with me? In Gear World, my car got broken into and my keyboard got stolen before a tour last week. So that was...
Oh, no.
That's my big gear update, which has never happened to me in New York City before.
Special spot in hell for gear thieves, man.
Seriously.
Yeah, it happened to Downtown Boys twice in California, actually, on our last tour after being a band for a while. Never happening. But, yeah, it was just, I packed up just slightly for a tour that I had to leave very early in the morning and just had a keyboard but covered up and woke up, window smashed, keyboard out. But we still did it, we had a duct tape window driving up to Buffalo.
Oofta.
Just borrowed a keyboard.
This time of year.
We made do.
Yeah. I'll feel for you. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so that's my gear update. Yeah.
This time of year, this part of the country.
It's cold, man.
It's super cold out there. I don't envy you.
I was just in New York City last week, and it was colder in Seattle than it was in Seattle, and it's but it wasn't as rainy, so I had that also going for me.
That's generally true, right? It's like doesn't get that.
Seattle's insulated, but if you really want snow, you can drive like 2 hours outside of the city, and there's ski slopes and all that kind of stuff.
If that, usually like once you pass North Bend going east on the 90, I mean that's I mean, from downtown Seattle, that's about 20 to 30 minutes.
I never go east on the 90. Actually, I really haven't been east on 90 since ever.
Well, you should, because it's cool back there. Hashtag East Side.
I take the two. I go up to Stevens Pass because that's where I would go. How I go to Leavenworth.
I just committed street cred suicide by saying hashtag East Side. By the way, as far as the Seattle scene goes.
Sure.
Well, that said, I don't plan on leaving this cozy, relatively mild winter except to go to California, so I'm a total wuss. But sorry to hear that your keyboard got jacked, but glad to hear that you're able to get through it and soldering on.
Yeah, we did it. Got some, pity record sales on Bandcamp, and we're getting back, got the window fixed. So yeah, and it's not I got a new keyboard, but yeah, it's all right. It's part of the job, right? Sometimes we get robbed.
Yeah, that's just the worst part of the job. One of them.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it happens to everyone in San Francisco now. It's just like, with with staggering wealth inequality in our urban areas comes like that. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Desperate times call for desperate measures on both ends of that equation. So.
Yep. So
not condoning it, but sympathetic a little bit.
Yeah, I hope someone's enjoying it or got some good money for it.
Or they were able to make the rent and take care of their family, or whatever it is.
Man, I don't know. Yeah. Like when Layla's Tunatone Teeny Tuna prototype got stolen, the guy who stole it sold it to a pawn shop for $20. I paid, I think now one would pay 150 times more for that guitar than the pawn shop bought it for. That person didn't make anything.
Yeah, pawn shop doesn't need that money.
No.
My hope is there's one of the high C sharps on the keyboard is stuck. It doesn't work and kind of messes up the whole keyboard if you hit it. So my hope is they're gonna be on stage taking a solo and hit that key and it just ruins their whole set.
Even better.
That's my revenge.
Even better if they hit that key on accident in the first place. It's not even in the scale anywhere.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
It's what they deserve.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's gonna sound like shit. Cool. So you told us that you have a new animal in your life.
Yeah, I also do that. I also just moved in New York and where I moved into, there's a lovely little cat named Boo, who's 14. Very, very vocal cat. Aww. Which is cute.
Aww. Vocal cats get so cute.
It's great when being a touring musician, it's, I think, often irresponsible to have your own pets. So it's nice when you move into places and they have a cat that's already being taken care of and that you're not responsible for its life but can enjoy it.
It's like being
an uncle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like being an aunt or an uncle. Exactly. Like you get to play with the kid and then you get to give it back when it starts screaming.
Or when its diaper's full or
yeah, that too.
Yeah, or it's a litter box. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little too close to home. Awesome. That sounds adorable.
Yeah, that's really cute.
Yeah, it's a nice perk of moving in any city or anywhere sucks, but yeah, you can.
Agreed.
There's some nice perks sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to fill like a 7-year background check recently for a new job, and they wanted to know every single residence I've been at in the last 7 years. I think I tallied it up, and it was like 14 different addresses, like almost every 6 months.
Yeah, that was me in my early 20s. Also, like, okay, so there was 1 year where I moved 4 times that year.
Okay, 14's a little high. I think it was like 10 or 11. Though,
yeah,
when it came down to
no, it was like I was like I don't remember if this was my address on McDonald Avenue or if that was my address on McDonald Avenue.
Yeah, I definitely had to hit up an old roommate.
Was it 385 or 835?
What was our right? I was like, what was our address? And I was only there for like 4 months. I just barely got mail there.
Ironically, for the topic of this episode, the only reason I've ever been able to do one of those is I look at my Amazon history.
Well, we will all judge you here very shortly.
Good, I deserve it.
Well, why don't we hop into our
sponsors?
Sponsors.
Yes. Can I lead it off?
Go for it. But I expect you to like sing some sort of catchy jingle hook to announce that it's time for sponsors.
Well, then you're going to be disappointed. Fender.
Well, that's my life.
Fender. I know. I just no butted you. Fender guitars is a sponsor of this week's podcast. I recently demoed 2 of their pedals. The Reflecting Pool, which is their reverb and their delay in a single box. I really like this pedal a lot. It's in stereo. I'm adding it to my board for my shows, my little fly rig for my shows this weekend, because I'm not bringing my normal board. It can do like the real normal stuff. It can do the real weird stuff. I just think it's I don't want to say surprisingly, but it's a very solid pedal. And if I really implore the audience to check it out, especially like it has, I think, 9 different delay settings and 3 different delay types, and each one has 3 levels of fidelity. You can add a secondary delay with modulation to get those like warbly tape sounds. And the reverb, there's 9 different kinds. Well, there's a hall, a room, and each has 3 different sizes of hall in the room. And then there's 3 other reverbs, like gated, reverse, and a shimmer, and 1 other. It's shockingly versatile for not having any screens on it. So props to Fender for that one. That's absolutely a winner. I like that pedal.
I remember getting my first Fender pedal and thinking, like, I didn't realize Fender made pedals, and in the course of that, realizing that Fender's actually had a relatively incredible history in the pedal world. It's super cool. So props to Fender, and super psyched to have them sponsor the show.
No, they're great, and special shout out to Martin, lovely person. Yeah.
Aww.
And who else is sponsoring this week, Andrew?
Electronic Audio Experiments.
Hell yeah.
That's about as close as I get to sing song on the podcast.
That's a lie.
But yeah, no. Electronic Audio Experiments is run and by this delightful gentleman by the name of John Snyder.
The absolute genius, John Snyder.
He is an absolute genius, and could not be more excited for him to be sponsoring the show. Really stand-up guy, and good gravy. Like just go check out some of their stuff.
His newest pedal is the Halberd. It's a medium to low stage overdrive, and it just unsurprisingly sounds fantastic. Check out our demo.
And from one guy who plays a lot of worship music to those of you who play a lot of worship music, do it. For the rest of you who don't play a lot of worship music, where you get that really low gain kind of drive sound, you don't know what you're missing out on. Jump into it and go for it, because it's so tasty.
I know you don't think that worship music is the only genre of music that uses that kind of overdrive sound.
I know, but that's what my experience is. Thank you.
And your experience isn't everybody's experience.
You know, it's funny because the only non-church band I've ever been in was a metal band, so low gain wasn't really our mantra.
Yeah, I've never played at a church, nor have I ever belonged to one.
Well,
I'm not missing.
Alrighty.
I don't feel like I'm missing out. Chill.
Speak for yourself. I'm actually trying to get back into playing for a church again, so I'm excited for it. So why don't we hop into our topic?
Yeah.
And I think it's appropriate to have none other than Joey to introduce us to what exactly is Music for Ice.
No Music for Ice.
Did I forget to say the no?
You sure did.
That's cold. I'm sorry.
Babamchik.
Joey, would you like to explain to us, tell us what exactly is No Music for Ice? How did it start, and where are you guys at now? And let's have a discussion about what that is, what that means, and what it means to be a musician and a leader in the music industry.
Yeah. So as I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware, there's a lot of evils that Amazon is involved in as a company, from wielding undue influence over politics in Seattle, for instance, to mistreating its warehouse workers. And notably, over the last couple of years, come out the extent to which they've been responsible for providing the technical backbone for ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, so the people who are responsible for the big deportation and detaining machine in the United States right now, that of course Obama made extensive use of, but Trump is accelerating in his own horrific way. And Amazon all along is providing web services for companies like Palantir, or these big data collection companies that feed information to ICE to let them track and find people who they then deport and commit other human rights abuses against. And so essentially these big tech companies, of which Amazon is the largest and most responsible, are helping ICE in its mission. And so there's been a lot of groups actually over the last couple of years who have been pointing this out and protesting Amazon over it. So there's the No Tech for ICE movement, which started 2018, which was tech workers, including some workers at Amazon itself, who were standing up and saying, we don't want to be part of creating and implementing this technology that is fueling these human rights abuses. And also No Tech for ICE movement with the organization called Mi Gente, who are also joining that movement of saying, we don't want to be part of this, and we're going to be protesting these companies who are part of this. So Amazon's always been involved in the music industry. Of course, they're selling music from their earliest years, but recently they've been more and more kind of encroaching into the business. So this year they kind of started really ramping up their Amazon exclusive features. They expanded their streaming services. And then the biggest kind of push came in October when they announced they were doing Intersect Festival,
right.
Which was Amazon Web Services holding a festival first weekend in December. All these big name artists, Casey Musgraves, Foo Fighters, Anderson .Paak headlining this thing, a bunch of other small artists. So this is like unprecedented move into the music industry. So of course, knowing all this about ICE, knowing about how they mistreat workers, a bunch of musicians were immediately very pissed off that Amazon was doing this, that they were coming kind of into our labor arena, right? So a lot of people were just immediately angry on Twitter, and that's good and serves one purpose. But then a lot of musicians are like, okay, we actually need to do something beyond that and to like organize some kind of collective response to this. And so inspired by Tech Won't Build It, the tech workers movement, and by Mi Gente's No Tech for ICE movement, a bunch of us began talking, and a few days later launched No Music for ICE, which was as a collective movement of musicians saying we're not going to play Amazon sponsored events or participate in Amazon exclusives until Amazon cuts its ties and its support for ICE.
And that started with an open letter. Is that's my understanding? Is that right?
Yeah, so it started with a bunch of us speaking, getting this letter together, and then getting what ended up being, at this point, over 1,000 musicians signed on to this letter. Within a week or two, to say they were also going to join this active boycott of ICE. So it's a pretty extraordinary thing to that quickly get artists united in that way. Famously, musicians aren't very well organized. And so to have this kind of momentum, and again, a collective action rather than just kind of like individualistic random boycotting is a big thing.
And really quickly, if you're listening, I'm going to drop a link so that you could sign that letter if you're a musician. It'll be in the show notes. So just open up your podcast app, click to read more of the show notes, and sign that letter. Do you mind if I just read the letter really quickly?
Yeah, please do.
So the letter says, it has recently come to light that Amazon Web Services, an Amazon subsidiary with known ties to ICE and law enforcement, is hosting a festival marked as an experience where, quote, music, technology, and art converge, end quote. We, the undersigned artists, are outraged that Amazon continues to provide the technical backbone supporting ICE's human rights abuses. We pledge to not participate in Amazon-sponsored events or engage in partnerships with Amazon in the future until Amazon publicly commits to 1. Terminate existing contracts with military, law enforcement, and government agencies, ICE, CBP, ORR, that commit human rights abuses. Stop providing cloud services and tools to organizations such as Palantir that power the U.S. government's deportation machine. 3, end projects that encourage racial profiling and discrimination, such as Amazon's facial recognition product. And 4, reject future engagements with aforementioned bad actors. We will not allow Amazon to exploit our creativity to promote its brand while it enables attacks on immigrants, communities of color, workers, and local economies. We call on all artists who believe in basic rights and human dignity to join us. It's short, it's to the point, and it's it's great, I think.
Yeah, no, we want to make this very clear, and it is pretty straightforward. You know, a lot of the music industry's kind of murky. Wherever there's money, there's some, you know, not great stuff going on. But here's a pretty clear thing where it's like, this is an extraordinarily evil company, and there's precedent for all of these other organizations already taking this action. And so this is an area where I think is a clear line where we as musicians can band together and collectively say, okay, we're going to be in solidarity with all of these other groups doing this action. And I think it's necessary for us to do that as workers, as like cultural workers right now, to stand together, because things are really bad and we need to be doing that. And that's where we have traction in this industry. You know, it's not just making a political song, right? I mean, that's important too, like a song with political lyrics. It's also like you can use your labor power as a cultural
and it seems
worker.
to me like companies, especially tech companies, they tend to, almost in a very Janus Two-Face kind of way, they use art and creativity to make themselves seem warmer, more personable, more like the people, and give them more even what they want. Everybody listens to music, everybody watches TV, everybody consumes creative endeavors, where at the same time, and this isn't specifically related to ICE, the existence of Amazon in Seattle is hugely contributive to this city becoming inhospitable to the creative endeavors that have made people want to move here in the first place. Artists can't afford to live here anymore. They're moving out of the city. They're moving to Portland. They're moving to Boise. They're moving to other places, and they're going to give their creative goods to those cities that do more right by them. And Amazon is such and not just even in terms of bringing in tech workers and raising the rent. In Seattle, they put so much money into politics. And so Seattle recently had an election, and like full disclosure, I own an Amazon Alexa. It's like the housewarming gift in Seattle, so I have one, and Amazon obviously knows this. And I think it was like a day or two before ballots were due, I get just this random package to my door. It's a very nice insulated thermos. It just says, "Alexa, order coffee." And you know that timing was
horrifying,
not coincidental. Like, here's this thing that would cost you $30 to buy in a store, like the day before you're gonna drive your ballot to the library or whatever. Like, that was intentional, and that I thought that was disgusting.
So I'm gonna jump in. So I'm gonna first of all, I'm gonna be forthcoming that I admittedly have a little bit of bias, and I tend to be at least a little bit more sympathetic to try and understand where the tech companies are coming from, given my current employment in the city and what that looks like for me. So I fully admit that that's the place where I come from. However, I will be coming at this from a place of I want to ask questions, and I do want to understand a little bit more. But the first question I want to jump in with is, Joey, what do you say to someone who says, shut up and play your music and keep your politics out of it? Your job is to entertain. Your job isn't to be an agent of social change.
I mean, it's an argument that this doesn't really mean anything. I think you can say that to a person in any position as a worker, and I think no matter what your position in the society is as a worker, you have space to act politically. And I think musicians as a whole need to kind of like understand our relationship to other types of workers. I mean, you hear that argument a lot in entertainment, right? With for like sports figures, right? Like shut up and play the game. Musicians,
right,
like shut up and do the thing. But you also hear, I think it's an extension of the argument of just like any worker who goes on strike, for instance. Like if a GM worker goes on strike, people say, you know, like shut up, go back to your job. If a teacher goes on strike, you say shut up, go back and teach the kids, right? People don't like it. Not people, but certain people don't like it when workers take
The
collective
people,
action.
widely
Yeah.
speaking.
When
Yeah.
workers take collective action.
Which is astounding and doesn't make any sense, but is the
Yeah.
truth.
And so I don't, you just need to push back against it and do it. And, we I don't know, we get an enormous amount of like trolls, of course, with the No Music for Ice campaign saying
Right.
things exactly like this. But I don't know, I'm coming from this from also being a labor organizer, like in the other side of my life. And so you're like used to these arguments, and that's just what you have to push up against, because no matter what industry or field you're in, that's how you advocate for your own interests, like to just shut up, especially if you're a person in a very precarious position, is to say like, no, shut up, stop like advocating for your rights, stop advocating for yourself to get more resources, stop advocating for your own safety. And so it's like, well, yeah, I mean, fuck you, this is what I'm going to do because this is what's in my interest. Like you're doing the same thing by telling me to shut up. That means like you're comfortable and want your resources.
Yeah, it's interesting that like people are obviously going to say that when they feel like it's coming from a selfish place, like, oh, you just want more. You just want more, paid time off, or you want more healthcare, or you want more family leave. And with the No Music for Ice, this is not a selfish endeavor at all. If anything, in my eyes, the artists who are boycotting Amazon, they're turning down substantial amounts of money.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it were self-interested, and I think musicians collectively organizing needs to grow because we need more resources. Like we don't have healthcare, most of us. I forget the organization that put together the report. Like average musician income is something like $20,000 for like full-time working musicians. So I think we also need to be doing that. But yeah, I mean, certainly this action is sort of like in solidarity with the broader working class, which includes immigrant workers, and of that same working class that we're a part of. So I think thinking about it in a broader labor context, that it is an action that is, us advocating for our own class interests, but of course is also in solidarity with other organizations that are pushing for this, but then with immigrant communities and just working people generally.
All right. The awesome answer. I'm a huge fan of not being silent in the face of people telling you to be silent for their own selfish reasons. Another question on the topic is, so Amazon supports ICE through AWS. AWS, for those of you who don't know, is Amazon Web Services. It's their cloud platform in which a lot of websites, apps, data storage and processing, a lot of that is where that happens. Another example of this would be Microsoft's Azure Cloud, to use another company's product. But the idea is a lot of what current technology is moving to is on the cloud, and these are the companies that are providing the platform for that storage space, for that computing platform. They've got their giant server rooms or server facilities where all this data physically lives on. And so my question to you is, Amazon itself is providing the services through use of AWS as a platform. Is Amazon, one, is it providing any further services other than just allowing the U.S. government to be a customer passively? And two, is Amazon responsible for the content that's hosted on its platform, that, and in a similar manner of the way that we've had this reckoning in social media in terms of what social media companies to what level they should be held responsible for what's held on their platforms, and such as fake news?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question. But I think they absolutely are responsible for this. I think exactly how Amazon is providing the support is a little murky, and it's a lot of private information. What we do know is they're very actively seeking out these contracts, these government contracts with organizations like ICE, like the CIA, like Palantir, right? They're very actively lobbying and exerting influence over government in order to get these contracts with these parts of the U.S. government, which are very actively committing horrific crimes and human rights abuses. So I think it's certainly a choice for them to be doing that, and a choice they're very actively pursuing again. So I think it's absolutely fair to then say, don't do that. Like, to say to all these companies, don't do that. And of course, a lot of tech companies are responsible, and all of them should be taken to task for this. However, Amazon is by far the biggest player in this government contract web services game, and so I think they're a natural target, and the people we should be targeting to kind of set a precedent in the industry, because of there has to be a line. You could easily come to historical analogies over companies in the past that have lent technology to horrific regimes that have committed enormous crimes. And I'm sure at the time people were saying things like, oh, well, we're just a company. We're just, taking the money and doing what we do as a company. And I just think that's a terrible argument, right? If you have like a collective action of a collective network of people saying, no, don't do this. Don't build the technology. You need to like socially embed how this technology and how your power and how your resources are used. And that's what we're trying to do here.
And it's not like it's unheard of for companies to decide to, for instance, not host hateful websites on their own servers. This is not it's not unheard of to turn down money for causes that are abhorrent.
And it's also not uncommon for people to attempt to turn down money for causes that are not abhorrent. They're just bigoted, such as not baking a cake for someone. I mean, people always find their ways for deciding that they don't want to provide services if they really feel like they don't want to provide services, and that's a sentiment that I tend to agree with.
Yeah, exactly. And they're making billions of dollars off of these government contracts, so it's not something they're going to do without an enormous fight, and we're trying to be part of that enormous fight to make them do it.
What other, out of curiosity, what other companies under this initiative do you have on your radar as far as companies you see as participating in problematic behavior, just from your perspective?
I mean, I think this is very intentionally focused on Amazon. I think Amazon is enough of a beast to be the focus of a campaign. But certainly, like Palantir, for instance, is just, the more you read about that company, the more you're like, holy, this is really dark dystopian stuff.
I'm admittedly not super familiar with what Palantir is. Could you tell me a little bit more about what they do?
Yeah, so it's a Peter Thiel founded company that's essentially just a big data company. So they mine all over the world public and private data to form data profiles of people. So they're essentially just a giant surveillance company,
right,
that then sells its data to the U.S. government. So it's kind of like a privatized NSA sort of operation.
Right. That doesn't necessarily have to follow the same regulations as the NSA or the FBI.
Exactly. So
assuming that those organizations feel like following the regulations that are currently in place in the first place.
Yeah. And we know they directly work with ICE to feed them this information. Again, it's murky exactly how the relationship functions, but they're a giant data collection company feeding stuff to ICE. So you can put together how they're using that information.
Right. That seems like a pretty clear connection.
Yeah.
All right. So for other companies who are not necessarily participating in this, but happen to use Amazon Web Services, AWS, as the platform for which they host their website or their data collection or whatever it is that they're doing to support the business end of their website, would you go as far as to say that you would also want to boycott other companies that are using AWS as their platform?
I think that Amazon is such a beast. It's a monopoly, right? It's very difficult to fight because it's a near monopoly in so many areas, including web retail, AWS, and in some capacity. And so it's very difficult, and I think not super useful to just say, okay, we're all going to just fully boycott everything from Amazon. I think it's difficult to think about how you would even organize that at this point. And so it's for that reason that we've been very intentional with this campaign of saying, this is what we're not going to do as musicians. We're not going to play Amazon events. We're not going to do Amazon exclusives. And recently we escalated this with a lot of artists pulling down digital music and streaming from Amazon.
Yeah,
And
that's a
so
little harder.
it's like
I've been trying to do that.
yeah, it is a
Yeah.
difficult thing. I mean, I was able to successfully do it. It's essentially you put in a takedown request.
Yeah.
If there's musicians listening, just email your label or distributor and put in a takedown request. It can take a couple weeks to do.
Yeah, if you're on TuneCore, you have to reach out to them specifically if you only want to be removed for a single store. So I know that's a big one. I'm assuming DistroKid is a similar one. I'm assuming CWV is the same as well.
Yeah, DistroKid, it's similar. I had the La Neve recordings on DistroKid, so I just had to reach out to them directly, which you can do. And so these are very targeted, us withholding our labor in very targeted ways, asking for certain demands from Amazon, which is how labor fights operate, right? If you're in GM, right? It's a classic example. You're not saying to everyone around the world, like, everyone boycott every GM car. Don't participate in this company whatsoever. You're saying, okay, we want a better labor contract and we're going to go on strike. Perhaps we're going to withhold our labor until we get our demands met.
Right.
And I think when you have near monopolies like GM or an Amazon, that's how it has to operate. Because you can't, like the government we could lobby the government to break up Amazon, which we should do. But as workers within Amazon's sphere, what I think we can do is withhold pieces of our labor to make demands of them.
Totally. Yeah.
I feel like that's reasonable. A point of clarification I'd like to make is you refer to AWS as a near monopoly, and my experience in the tech industry is that Microsoft's Azure Cloud is a relatively equal competitor, if not beginning to edge out AWS. Given like, for instance, the recent JEDA contract that was awarded to Microsoft. So a question I have is,
it's still one of the top like 3 players in the world, like.
No, and I 100% agree with that. I just the part of me wonders at what point do we start demanding that other companies move away to other cloud platforms, because there are other viable solutions.
Right.
And so there's the part of me that's like, well, I'm hesitant to say, well, AWS is the only way that these companies can do business. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. At the same time, there are pros and cons, and I'm not the one who's sitting in the driver's seat just looking at the business model and saying,
can't imagine being Netflix and be like, oh, we're going to change servers. That I don't know how long that process would take.
Right. And I'm not necessarily saying Netflix, but for instance, Fender has all of Fender Play and all of their apps run off of AWS. Right. And not that I have anything against Fender, quite obviously the opposite, but just as a matter from, oh, absolutely. I have nothing but glowing things to say about Fender, but for the sake of discussing the ethics of the conversation, at what point do we say, well, hey, Fender, have you considered moving platforms as a motion of solidarity with a large chunk of the industry that you operate in, with a lot of your consumer base being musicians and whatnot?
Yeah,
so
no, absolutely. And as you're explaining, right, you're saying Microsoft is the biggest other competitor, but they just got this giant Department of Defense contract, right? So it's like, do you want to listen? So, but I think certainly that, yeah, that's another tactic, as this escalates, and we've been escalating it again by like pulling down music. I think, yeah, absolutely, like shifting whatever pieces of the music industry that we have access to and can leverage power within to shift their stuff off of Amazon Web Services. That that's certainly another possible action, another like point where we can do something.
Yeah,
fair enough. So has Amazon responded and or been responsive in any sort of active or one-time sense to this campaign?
No, I mean, their general response to any pressure put on them seems to be to ignore it and then to pour an enormous amount of money into killing it. So they've largely ignored us, but we've nevertheless, I believe, had a very clear impact on their attempt to encroach further in the music industry. This campaign got press in every major music publication, and then also in just general purpose newspapers. Intersect Fest got almost no coverage.
Yeah, I fully forgot it was happening until No Music for Ice posted about it. I'm like, oh, hey.
Right, exactly. So
how did it feel to see your name in on Rolling Stone, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to get the campaign into Rolling Stone and seeing them pay attention to stuff like this. And I think it speaks to the power of musicians doing this kind of collective action, because it's pretty unprecedented, right? A similar group of us did an action 2 years ago against South by Southwest, and South by Southwest had a clause in their artist contract saying they would work with ICE to deport foreign artists if foreign artists like played unofficial South by Southwest shows.
What?
And a big group of artists immediately sent out a public letter, and we got hundreds of people sign on to it, and it got covered in just every major music publication, and we actually won very quickly.
Man.
It's like within a week and a half.
That's amazing.
South by Southwest dropped this clause because these companies just are so used to musicians like thinking of ourselves as just these, independent small businesses. So when you actually do stuff together, it really scares them and has a big impact, and the press pays attention to it. And so, yeah, with Intersect, it was the press paid a lot of attention to our campaign. Intersect got no press other than some mentions in local Las Vegas media where it was. And even though a lot of artists didn't drop off the fest, which we also weren't asking them to do, I think a lot of artists were under contract, had like signed on to the fest without knowing what it was. But nevertheless, I didn't see any bands that I follow posting anything about the fest. It seemed pretty widely understood as just kind of a tainted thing. And in sense that was very successful because Amazon's intention with this was to cool themselves, to build steam for their streaming brand, to build steam for, I'm sure, what are their bigger plans for coming into the music business. And I think we effectively put a roadblock into that.
That's awesome.
Right, and it's interesting that you bring that up in terms of the artists that who did end up playing the fest. Because, for instance, I was reading through the list of artists that did end up playing. I believe Japanese Breakfast was one of them. I was almost surprised to see that name there because they've got a history, especially in the gear world, of being very vocally, socially conscious. The example that comes to mind is when they boycotted and wrote open letter to TC Electronic for when they did
the Pussy Melter
the preset model.
This is called
the Pussy Melter with.
Yeah.
Right. They did that preset called the Pussy Melter for one of their.
She got so much like troll.
Right, and that was rad, and I loved that they went out of their way to make that statement, and then to see them on this, I was like, there's got to be something more to this, and so that was one of my questions: is what am I missing?
Like Joey just said, like they signed onto this contract. And they didn't know it was an Amazon thing. Like, I don't think that wasn't communicated.
Right, which I think is
dastardly. That's and it happens. Like, sometimes you don't, like, it wasn't called Amazon Music Festival. It was called Intersect Music Festival. Intersection sounds wonderful. It's such a great word that makes people feel, like, warm and fuzzy on the inside. You don't think it's, like, deportation.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've pretty intentionally not been trying to focus on like shaming artists playing it. I think especially as our musicians, you get scammed with contracts on these things sometimes. When you go into, because we hadn't announced this movement beforehand, and going in, it's like the music industry sucks. It's very hard to make money. Sometimes these festivals are the only way you get money. And so I understand to some extent people going into it not understanding what it was exactly or what the reaction and this movement was going to be. I think at this point, we've established the picket line around this, right? We put this line in the sand. And from here on out, I think I'm much more comfortable being like, if you sign up for something like this, I see you on an Amazon thing, I'm gonna yell at you, and we're going to try to have a collective thing, because you're scabbing at that point, right? You're scabbing. This is a collective movement with lots of other groups participating in it. And so I think at this point you're scabbing. But yeah, again, we very intentionally, with all of our press stuff, we're not yelling at these bands playing it, a lot of whom are our friends, our coworkers.
Right. And I think that's incredibly wise. 100%. I think that's incredibly wise. That's a measured response, and I think speaks to the maturity of what this movement is and what it stands for. Because I think that's one thing that I see when protests start to happen. One of the criticisms is like, oh, they're just being all upset and angry, and it's not very well organized, or they don't really know what they're boycotting, or it's not. And what I've heard through this whole episode is this is a very well thought out, very well executed, and very intentional movement. And I really appreciate the level at which I'm hearing that. I mean, that means a lot to me, and I hope that means a lot to you as well.
It's unsurprising seeing the people who are involved at the top level of No Music for Ice.
Right.
It's
Yeah, it's been a lot of us doing it on a few campaigns now.
Yeah, so I feel like it's a great thing, and I'm glad that we all brought up the point about not necessarily blaming the artist quite yet for participating in Intersect. It is generally my understanding that not everybody or even most people didn't realize it was an Amazon event when they signed on. That like you said, it's the music industry. So I had a couple questions just for people who want to get involved. Do you mind if I run through those real quickly?
Yeah, please.
So is this a cause that a musician of any caliber can join? Like, are you only looking for people who are signed to labels, or can any DIY artist who's ever like self-released anything sign your letter?
Yeah, we're looking for everyone to both sign and to take your music off of Amazon or one or the other of those things. A lot of, we have people who are on major labels signed on, and we have people who have, released like one EP with DistroKid or on Bandcamp. So we need everyone, I think, collectively on this, and the more people signed up, the better. And you go to nomusicforice.com and you can see how to sign the letter and see some instructions about how to take your music off of Amazon.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll post a link to that as well. For those people who aren't necessarily musicians on their own, who aren't being asked to put their music on Amazon, so like for fans, for example, how do fans help the cause without hurting artists who need the income from these common digital sources or from Amazon or other places like that? Like how can fans, this is a silly question, but how can fans help those artists or the cause itself?
Yeah, there's so many ways. You can boost, like just signal boost, share the No Music for Ice stuff that a lot of artists are posting. Certainly don't buy music on Amazon, right? Buy stuff. I mean, you should just be doing this anyway. Buy stuff on Bandcamp or directly from labels. That's going to ensure more of the money goes directly to artists anyway. If you do really want to stream, use some of the other streaming services, which probably most of you are. Very few people actually use Amazon streaming. So if you are an artist considering taking your music off Amazon streaming, it's like 1% of your streaming income probably right now. It's not actually going to hit you that hard.
I saw that they paid out more per stream, but it's way fewer streams.
Yeah, nobody's using it. And then, I mean, support the artists who are taking part in this collective action. I think a lot of artists are still scared to take part in this because it is putting something on the line, right? The music industry is increasingly run by a few big players, right? By a few record companies, by like Spotify and by Amazon. And those of us sticking our necks out there, it's a very real thing. Like you get shadow banned from certain things. Labels don't want to talk to you anymore because you're making too much noise. The power brokers, obviously, just like in any industry, don't like the union leaders, don't like people doing this stuff. So if you see artists taking a stand, like support them, buy their stuff, go to their shows, become fans, like be part of creating this alternative sphere where we can build a separate zone of power to take on these kind of evil players in the industry.
Hell yeah. And then my last question that I have, and this is sort of a what's next, but this is probably Amazon's biggest season of the year. So what are you all, how are you all working to maintain momentum in this time where everyone's just convenience shopping on Amazon? And maybe they don't have warm fuzzies about Amazon, but like they feel that this is their option to get their gifts and stuff out to their loved ones.
Yeah, absolutely. The escalation of pulling music from Amazon was very intentionally scheduled to start on Black Friday and continue through the holiday season. So it was very intentionally addressing this, that people are going to be on there and like buying music and using Amazon a lot. So we're going to be keeping on pushing this. Intersect was last weekend from when we're recording this, but this movement was not just about Intersect, right? This is going to continue on. We're going to keep fighting Amazon inside of the music industry. So nothing next step to announce right now. But we will definitely have more coming out and more escalations coming out and getting more artists to sign on. And this is going to continue to build and move. And like workers across the country right now, I think it's really exciting to see musicians continue to build this kind of collective action. Like the pulling of streaming services, that was the first time that's ever happened, that musicians have collectively pulled music from a streaming service. As far as I can understand, it's probably the first time musicians have in some way collectively withheld labor or a product of their labor from the music industry since the American Federation of Musicians strike in 1942. So it's very obviously smaller. It's smaller than that. I might be wrong, but from what I can tell, I think it is. And so it's obviously a smaller scale than that at the moment, but I think it's really exciting to see musicians taking these steps to understanding we have power when we're united.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of anything comparable at this scale. I mean, I know I've seen like not playing music in South Africa or Israel or other places that have, human rights violations, but to take something on like this in the United States is fairly unprecedented. One more question that kind of ties into that. Since there wasn't really a strong, immediate, immediate answer to what's next, where should people go to keep in the loop with No Music for Ice?
Yeah, so there's a Twitter account, nomusicforice.com, that tweets out all of the announcements and statements, and the organization we've been working with to help us do a lot of the technical on this, called Fight for the Future, is also putting out a lot of this. And you can also go to nomusicforice.com. And again, if you're a musician, sign up and you'll be getting updates about upcoming actions, asking you to sign on to things and be part of this. So any of those sources will keep on putting out new stuff.
Oh, I just saw Lisa Prank on there. Lovely.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of the participating artists like Lisa retweeted into it, so you can kind of see who's participating. And it's good.
I see. I'm opening my band's opening for them on Tuesday. We're really excited about it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they're great.
I'm very excited.
You guys made sure to host your website not on AWS, right?
As far as I know, I didn't make the website, but yeah.
I mean, I don't think AWS is the first place you go to host a single page website.
Oh, I just like to. I was just being funny. Okay, I just like to be a joke.
We're on Bluehost, if you're wondering. That's not AWS.
Cool beans.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say while we still have you on the line?
I think that's most of it. Yeah, thanks for boosting this. That's how this is getting out there, and how it's making Amazon a line not to cross is by people putting it out there. So yeah, thank you for having me on to talk about it.
Yeah, anytime.
Well, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for putting up with my pestering questions as I started to push some buttons.
Andrew, I'm very proud of you. I'm really proud of you for not saying the words to play devil's advocate for the minute. Very proud of you.
I managed not to say that is one of my resolutions for the second year of the podcast. Is
oh, really? Well, is it because I always say white man when you do that?
It's while we're on the subject, where do a joke that I saw today coming from Aaron Abubo that I think we'll all appreciate is where do mansplainers get their water?
From a well, actually.
Yep.
Wow, I haven't heard that one. Yeah, that's good.
Nice. Well, for everyone listening, please rate, review on iTunes. Unless you really hate us, then please just delete this and never listen to it again. We have
or just write passive aggressive 5-star reviews that still call for me to be removed anyways.
That was 4 stars. I think that one was. I think you did make me lose a star on that one, Andrew. We have merch at getoffsetpodcast.com. If you go to our website and you want to support the show by buying through reverb.com, go up to the header. It'll say shop and support. You can shop thereverb.com from there, and we get a little bit of a kickback. You can support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. For $25 a month, I will write you a song on month 2. And it's not going to be a long song nor a great one. No promises for quality. For everything else, thanks for listening. Thanks for understanding. Until next time, I've been Emily.
I am Andrew.
I'm Joey.
Goodbye.
Right. 1, 2,
Bye.
3.